All right, good morning, class. Welcome back. This is part 2 of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, translated by Simon Armitage. We're going to continue off of where we started from the last video. Once again, this is going to be one continuous take. Now, I'm not calling anybody out in particular in this video, but let's just make sure that we are all sitting up, that we're not leaning forward, and that we are not falling asleep. All right? So, let's just jump right into it. Part 2. This happening was a gift, just as Arthur had asked for, and had yearned to hear of while the year was young. And if guests had no subject as they strolled to their seats, now they chattered of Gawain's chances in this challenge. And Gawain had been glad to begin the game. But don't be shocked if the plot turns pear-shaped. For men might be merry when addled with mead, but each year, short-lived, is unlike the last, and rarely resolves in the style it arrived. So the festival finishes, and a new year follows, in eternal sequence, season by season, and after lavish Christmas come the lean days of Lent, when the flesh is tested with fish and simple food. Then the world's weather wages war on winter. Cold shrinks earthwards, and clouds climb. Sun-warmed, shimmering rains come showering onto meadows and fields where flowers unfurl, and woods and grounds wear a wardrobe of green. Birds burble with life and build busily as summer spreads, settling on slopes as it should. Now every hedgerow brims with blossom and with bud, and lively songbirds sing from lovely leafy woods. So summer comes in season with its subtle airs, when the west wind sighs among shoots and seeds, and those plants which flower and flourish are a pleasure, as their leaves let drip their drink of dew, and they sparkle and glitter when glanced by sunlight. Then autumn arrives to harden the harvest, and with it comes a warning to ripen before winter. The drying airs arrive, driving up dust from the face of the earth to the heights of heaven. And wild sky wrestles the sun with its winds, and the leaves of the lime lay littered on the ground, and grass that was green turns withered and gray. Then all which had risen over ripens and rots, and yesterday on yesterday the year dies away, and winter returns, as is the way of the world through time. At Michaelmas the moon stands like the season's sign, a warning to Gawain to rouse himself and ride. Yet, by All Saints' Day, he was still at Arthur's side, and they feasted in the name of their noble knight with the revels and riches of the Round Table. Now, I'm going to stop there at that point. So at this point, we are at lines 538. Now, at this point in time, what's happening? Well, they base all of that, what I said now, all those beautiful literary devices that Simon Armitage translated, all that imagery that he painted of the year going by and all of the scenery and beauty that comes with a changing season. In simpler terms, that was just a fancy way to say a full year has passed. That's all that this is saying. That essentially this is the time period between when the Green Knight first originally came in and issued that challenge to Sir Gawain, and between the next year for when it's time for Gawain to go and hold up his end of the deal. All right. The lords of that hall and their loving ladies were sad and concerned for the sake of their knight, but nevertheless they made light of his load. Men, joyless at his plight, made jokes and rejoiced. Then, sorrowfully, after supper, he spoke with his uncle, and openly talked of the trip he must take. Now, lord of my life, I must ask for your leave. You were witness to my wager. I have no wish to retell you the terms. They're nothing but a trifle. I must set out tomorrow to receive that stroke from the knight in green, and let God be my guide. Then the cream of Camelot crowded around, Gawain and Eric, and others of that ilk, Sir Dodinal and the dreaded, the Duke of Clarence, Lancelot, Lionel, Lucan the Good, and Sir Bors and Sir Bedivere, both big names, and powerful men such as Mador de la Porte. This courtly committee approaches the king to offer up heartfelt advice to our hero, and sounds of sadness and sorrow were heard. That one as worthy and well-liked as Gawain should suffer that strike, but offer no stroke in reply. Yet, keeping calm, the knight just quipped, "Why should I shy away? If fate is kind or cruel, man still must try." He remained all that day, and in the morning he dressed, asked early for his arms, and all were produced. First, a rug of rare cloth was unrolled on the floor, heaped with gear which glimmered and gleamed, and onto it he stepped to receive his armored suit. He tries on his tunic of extravagant silk. Then the neat cut cloak closed at the neck, its lining finished with a layer of white fur. Then they settled his feet into steel shoes, and clad his calves, clamped them with greaves, then hinged and highly polished plates were knotted with gold thread to the knight's knees. Then leg guards were fitted, lagging the flesh, attached with thongs to his thick-set thighs. Then comes the suit of shimmering steel rings encasing his body and his costly clothes, well-burnished braces to both of his arms, good elbow guards and glinting metal gloves, all the trimmings and trappings of a knight tricked out to ride. A metal suit that shone, gold spurs which gleam with pride, a keen sword swing from the silk belt to his side. So, he's getting ready for his journey to leave right now, and before he leaves, at this point the knights are going, all right, we'll send him out in style. We're gonna give him all the fixings. We're gonna make him look proper, look like an amazing, like picture perfect image of what a knight should be. Fastened in his armor, he seemed fabulous, famous, every link looking golden to the very last loop. Yet for all that metal, he still made it to mass, honored the Almighty before the high altar. After which he comes to the king and his consorts and asks to take leave of the ladies and lords. They escort and kiss him and commend him to Christ. Now, Gringolet is rigged out and ready to ride with a saddle which flickered with fine gold fringes, and was set with new studs for the special occasion. The bridle was bound with stripes of bright gold. The apparel of the panels was matched in appearance to the color of the saddle bows and crupper and cover, and nails of red gold were arrayed all around, shining splendidly like splintered sunlight. Then he holds up his helmet and kisses it without haste. It was strongly stapled and its lining was stuffed, and sat high on his head, fastened behind with a colorful cloth to cover his neck, embroidered and bejeweled with brilliant gems on the broad silk border, and with birds on the seams, such as painted parrots perched above periwinkles, and turtle doves and true love knots tightly entwined as if women had worked at it 7 winters at least. The diamond diadem was greater still. It gleamed with flawless flashing gems, both clear and smoked, it seemed. Now, I want to point out something. Any time that they start mentioning Sir Gawain's outfit, the way that they've dressed him, they always find a way to mention something that they put to cover his neck. Part of it was before it was part of his tunic. Now it was his helmet with a colorful cloth covering the back of his neck. Now, I think we can all make some well-rounded deductions. It doesn't take an English major to see why he's sort of covering his neck. Because, obviously, this challenge where he now has to take a blow, same one that he dealt to the Green Knight, it's scary in a sense, and he's sort of trying to give himself that cover. As a matter of fact, this entire time that I've been reading, or the majority of the time that I've been reading this section, a lot of it has to do with him trying to protect himself. Him covering himself with all of these lavish clothes, all of this beautiful polished armor that he's wearing and getting on his horse. But before he goes and talks with the king, he makes sure to go to the church and pray to God. Why is he praying to God? because he needs that extra protection. At this point, Gawain feels he's obviously scared. He's concerned. He's feeling very vulnerable. So at this point, he's trying to protect himself to the best of his ability. Then they showed him the shining scarlet shield with its pentangle painted in pure gold. He seized it by its strap and slung it round his neck. He looked well in what he wore, and was worthy of it. And why the pentangle was appropriate to that prince, I intend to say, though it will I intend to say, though it will stall our story. It is a symbol that Solomon once set in place, and is taken to this day as a token of fidelity. For the form of the figure is a five-pointed star, and each line overlaps and links with the last, so is ever eternal, and when spoken of in England is known by the name of the endless knot. So it suits this soldier in his spotless armor, fully faithful in 5 ways, 5 times over. For Gawain was as good as the purest gold, devoid of vices, but virtuous, loyal, and kind. So bore that badge on both, his shawl and shield alike. A prince who talked the truth, a notable, a knight. So at this point in time, they're painting Gawain in this picture perfect image of what a knight should be. They're saying he represents knighthood. Though he may be the weakest, or he might not be as accomplished as the other knights that surround him at the round table, he is a knight. He is what a knight should represent. Virtuous, kind, loyal, all of these things. They're saying this is what he represents. First, he was deemed flawless in his 5 senses. And secondly, his 5 fingers were never at fault. And thirdly, his faith was founded in the 5 wounds Christ received on the cross, as the Creed recalls. And fourthly, if that soldier struggled in skirmish, one thought pulled him through above all other things, the fortitude he found in the 5 joys which Mary had conceived in her Son, our Savior. For precisely that reason, the princely rider had the shape of her image inside his shield. So by catching her eye, his courage would not crack. The 5th set of 5, which I heard the knight followed, included friendship and fraternity with fellow men, purity and politeness that impressed at all times, and pity which surpassed all pointedness. 5 things which meant more to Gawain than to most other men. So these 5 sets of 5 were fixed in this knight, each linked to the last through the endless line. A 5-pointed form which never failed, never stronger to one side or slack at the other, but unbroken in its being from beginning to end. However, its trail is tracked and traced. So the star on the spangling shield he sported shone royally in gold on a ruby-red background, the pure pentangle, as people have called it, for years. Then, lance in hand, held high, and got up in his gear, he bids them all goodbye, one final time, he fears. So, again, just a continuation saying that this pentangle that is represented on his shields represents the 5 traits that mostly align with Sir Gawain. The so he was deemed faultless in his 5 senses, essentially saying that one, his faith was always in place. He always remained faithful, and obviously when we say faithful, it means to Christ, to God, and whatnot. So much so that he has the likeness of the Mother Mary on the inside of his shield. Um, he never steals. Um, he always thought of the soldiers fighting around him. Um, and the 5th set, let me see. I have friendship and fraternity with fellow men, and being pure and polite. Essentially, everything that represents what a knight should represent. Spiked with the spurs, the steed sped away, with such force that the firestone sparked underfoot. All sighed at the sight, and with sinking hearts they whispered their worries to one another, concerned for their comrade. The pity! By Christ, if a lord so noble should lose his life, to find his equal on earth would be far from easy. Cleverer to have acted with caution and care. Deemed him a duke, a title he was due, a leader of men, a lord of many lands. Better that than being battered into oblivion, beheaded by an ogre through headstrong pride. How unknown for a king to take counsel of a knight in the grip of an engrossing Christmas game. Warm tears welled up in their weepy eyes as gallant Sir Gawain galloped from court that day. He sped from home and hearth and went his winding way on steep and snaking paths, just as the story says. So, at this point in time, Sir Gawain has just left, and everybody is kind of staying behind, like essentially saying, "Why is this happening?" Like all this, the fact that this man so noble, this image of knighthood. If knighthood had a poster boy, it would be Gawain. This man should lose his life over a silly Christmas game. So, now we're going to continue. Now, through England's realm he rides and rides. Sir Gawain, God's servant, on his grim quest, passing long dark nights unloved and alone, foraging to feed, finding little to call food, with no friend but his horse through forests and hills, and only our Lord in heaven to hear him. He wanders near to the north of Wales, with the Isles of Anglesey off to the left. He comes to the coast, fording each course, crossing at Holyhead and coming ashore in the wilds of the Wirral, whose wayward people both God and good men have quite given up on. And he constantly inquires of those he encounters if they know or not, in this neck of the woods, of a great green man or a green chapel. No, they say, never, never in their lives. They know of neither a knight nor a chapel so strange. He trails through bleak terrain, his mood and manner change, at every twist and turn towards that chosen church. In a strange region, he scales steep slopes. Far from his friends, he cuts a lonely figure, where he bridges a brook or wades through a waterway. Ill fortune brings him face to face with a foe so foul or fierce, he is bound to use force. So momentous are his travels among the mountains, till just a tenth would be a tall order. Here he scraps with serpents and snarling wolves. Here he tangles with wadwoes, causing trouble in the crags, or with bulls and bears and the odd wild boar. Hard on his heels through the highlands come giants. Only diligence and faith in the face of death will keep him from becoming a corpse or carrion. And the wars were one thing, but winter was worse. Clouds shed their cargo of crystallized rain, which froze as it fell to the frost-glazed earth. Now, I want, just really quickly, if you have a moment, I'd like you to, I know that what I just said, I read quite a lot, and maybe your brain didn't fully process it. So, let's just take a deep breath in. Just know, it's okay to feel a little overwhelmed when reading. Okay? Not all of us are English majors. Not all of us share this passion for literature that some English teachers or some other people may share. So if you felt a little overwhelmed with everything that I just said, or I kind of went through it and you were listening, but you didn't really comprehend, it's okay. Luckily, with Simon Armitage's translation, it's very modern. So, my best piece of advice, if you need to slow down the recording, if you need to go back to certain places, go ahead and do that. It is okay. It's okay to not understand. It's okay to need more clarification than others do. All right? So, with that being said, let's continue forward. With nerves frozen numb, he napped in his armor, bivouacked in the blackness amongst bare rocks, where meltwater streamed from the snow-capped summits, and high overhead hung chandeliers of ice. So in peril and pain, Sir Gawain made progress, crisscrossing the countryside until Christmas Eve. Then, at that time of tiding, he prayed to highest heaven, let Mother Mary guide him towards some house or haven. Next morning he moves on, skirts the mountainside, descends a deep forest, densely overgrown, with ancient oaks and huddles of hundreds, and vaulting hills above each half of the valley. Hazel and hawthorn are interwoven, decked and draped in damp, shaggy moss, and bedraggled birds on bare, black branches pipe pitifully into the piercing cold. Under cover of the canopy, he girded Gringolet. Through mud and marshland, a most mournful man, concerned and afraid in case he should fail in the worship of our deity, who, on that date, was born the Virgin's Son, to save our souls. He prayed with heavy heart, Father, hear me, and Lady Mary, our mother most mild, let me happen on some house where mass might be heard, and matins in the morning. Meekly I ask, and here I utter my pater, Ave and Creed. He rides the path and prays, dismayed by his misdeeds, and signs Christ's cross and says, be near me in my need. So, at this point, we start to really see this element of Christianity being brought in. And this is not uncommon for a text that's being written during this time. Keep in mind, this is the early, it's like around 13th century. So at this point in time, he's really showing how much he relies in his faith to sort of push him forward, and how he's sort of using Christ and the Lord as a guide map to wherever it is that he needs to be. No sooner had he signed himself 3 times than he became aware, in those woods, of high walls in a moat, on a mound, bordered by the boughs of thick-trunked timber which trimmed the water, the most commanding castle a knight ever kept, positioned on a site of sweeping parkland, with a palisade of pikes pitched in the earth in the midst of tall trees for 2 miles or more. From the corner of his eye this castle became clearer, as it sparkled and shone within shimmering oaks. And with helmet in hand he offered up thanks to Jesus and St. Julian, both gentle and good, who had courteously heard him and heeded his cry. A lodging at last! So allow it, my lord. Then he girded Gringolet with his gilded spurs, and purely by chance chose the principal approach to the building, which brought him to the end of the bridge with haste. So, his prayers have been answered. He's found a place to rest. Finally. So, as we come close, I'd say we're close to about halfway done with the book. Again, let's take a deep breath. Let's remember, it's okay to be a little confused. We all learn at different paces. We all comprehend at different paces. So don't feel bad if you're a little behind. It's okay. Drawbridge stood withdrawn. The front gates were shut fast. Such well-constructed walls would blunt the storm wind's blast. In the saddle of his steed he halts on the slope of the delving moat with its double ditch. Out of water of wondrous depth, the walls then loomed overhead to a heavenly height, course after course of crafted stone. Then battlements embellished in the boldest style, and turrets arranged around the ramparts, with lockable loopholes set into the lookouts. The knight had not seen a more stunning structure. Further in, I was drawn to a hall, attended architecturally by many tall towers, with a series of spires spiking the air, all crowned by carvings exquisitely cut. Uncountable chimneys, the color of chalk, sprouted from the roof and sparkled in the sun. So perfect was that vision of painted pinnacles, clustered within the castle's enclosures, it appeared that the place was cut from paper. Then, a notion occurred to that noble knight. To inveigle a visit, get invited inside, to be hosted and housed, and all the holy days remain. Responding to his call, the pleasant porter came, a watchman on the wall, who welcomed Sir Gawain. "Good morning," said our man. "Will you bear a message to the owner of this hall and ask him for shelter?" "By St. Peter," said the porter, "it'll be my pleasure, and I'm willing to bet you'll be welcome to a bed." Then he went on his way, but came back at once with a group who had gathered to greet the stranger. The drawbridge came down, and they crossed the ditch, and knelt in the frost in front of the knight, to welcome this man in a way deemed worthy. Then they yielded to their guest, yanked open the gate, and bidding them to rise, he rode across the bridge. He was assisted from the saddle by several men, and the strongest among them stabled his steed. Then knights and squires of knights drew near to escort him, with courtesy into the castle. As he took off his helmet, many hasty hands reached out to receive it and to serve this stranger, and his sword and his shield were taken aside. Then he made himself known to nobles and knights, and proud fellows pressed forward to confer their respects. Still heavy with armor, he was led to the hall, where a fire burned bright with the fiercest flames. And the master of the manor emerged from his chamber to greet him in the hall with all due honor, saying, "Behave in my house, as your heart pleases. To whatever you want, you are welcome. Do what you will." "My thanks," Gawain exclaimed. "May Christ reward you well." Then firmly, like good friends, they hugged and held a while. Gawain gazed at the lord who greeted him so gracefully, the great one who governed that grand estate, powerful and large in the prime of his life, with a bushy beard as red as a beaver's, steady in his stance, solid of build, with a fierce face, but with fine conversation. A man quite capable, it occurred to Gawain, of keeping such a castle and captaining his knights. Escorted to his quarters, the lord quickly orders that the servant be assigned to assist Gawain, and many were willing to wait on his word. They brought him to a bedroom beautifully furnished with fine silken fabrics, finished in gold, and curious coverlets, lavishly quilted in bloodless ermine, and embroidered to each border. Curtains ran on cords through red gold rings. Tapestries from Toulouse and Turkestan were fixed against walls and fitted underfoot. With humorous banter, Gawain was helped out of his chainmail coat and costly clothes. Then they rushed to bring him an array of robes of the choicest cloth. He chose and changed, and as soon as he stood in that stunning gown with its flowing skirts which suited his shape, it almost appeared to the persons present that spring with its spectrum of colors had sprung. So alive and lean were that young man's limbs. A nobler creature Christ had never created, they declared. This knight, whose country was unclear, now seemed to them by sight a prince without a peer, in fields where fierce men fight. So, even in other countries or other places, people are able to recognize Gawain's brilliance and his stature and how he exudes this presence of being a knight. Now, let's take a little break. And I'd like to propose a little proposition. Have a little fun with something. So, if you're not part of my class, then you can skip past this. If you're a teacher and you'd like to use this audio to help assist you with your class and you want to use this, by all means. But to my class in specific, I have a proposition for you. If you were locked in and you were paying attention, I'm going to give you the chance to get some extra credit. I allow you the chance to get, say, 5, maybe 10 points worth of extra credit. This is what you have to do. Right now, you have to get up, get to the front of the class, and as loudly as you can, well, obviously not, let's not say as loudly as you can, let's say in a decently pronounced voice, I want you to give your best Kool-Aid Man impression. If you don't know who the Kool-Aid Man is, he's the guy, he's that giant pitcher of Kool-Aid that runs through the door and yells, "Oh yeah." I want you to give your best Kool-Aid Man impression in the front of the class. Once you do that, I will ask you a question based off of what we've just read from part 2. So if you've been paying attention, this shouldn't be a problem. But this extra credit is only available to the first person that stands in front of the class and gives their best Kool-Aid Man impression. If you don't want to do that, you can take your seat and just completely ignore this entire thing. All right? Now, to continue. In front of a flaming fireside of a chair was pulled into place for Gawain, and padded with covers and quilts, all cleverly stitched. Then a cape was cast across the night of rich brown cloth with embroidered borders, finished inside with the finest furs, ermine to be exact, and a hood which echoed it. Resplendently dressed, he settled in his seat. As his limbs thawed, so his thoughts tightened. So his thoughts lightened. Soon a table was set on sturdy trestles, covered entirely with a clean white cloth, and cruets of salt and silver spoons. In a while he washed and went to his meal. Staff came quickly and served him in style, with several soups all seasoned to taste, double helpings as was fitting, and a feast of fish, some baked in bread, some browned over flames, some boiled or steamed, some stewed in spices, and subtle sauces to tantalize his tongue. 4 or 5 times he called it a feast, and the courteous company happily cheered him along. On pennants plates you dined there better board to come. The warming, heady wine then freed his mind for fun. Now, through tactful talk and tentative inquiry, polite questions are put to his prince. He responds respectfully and speaks of his journey from the court of Arthur, king of Camelot, royalty and ruler of the Round Table, and he says they now sit with Gawain himself, who has come here at Christmas time, quite by chance. Once the master has gathered that his guest is Gawain, he thinks it so thrilling, he laughs out loud. All the men of that man were of the same mind, being keen and quick to appear in his presence. This person famed for prowess and purity, whose noble skills were sung to the skies, whose life was the stuff of legend and lore. Then Night spoke softly to Night, saying, "Watch now, we'll witness his graceful ways. Hear the faultless phrasing of flawless speech. If we listen, we will learn the merits of language, since we have in our hall a man of high honor. Ours is a generous and giving God, to grant that we welcome Gawain as our guest as we sing of his birth, who was born to save us. We few shall learn a lesson here, in tact and manner true, and hopefully will hear love's tender language too." Once dinner was done, Gawain drew to his feet, and darkness neared as day became dusk. Chaplains went off to the castle's chapels, to sound the bells hard, to signal the hour of evensong. Summoning each and every soul, the Lord goes alone. Then his lady arrives, concealing herself in a private pew. Gawain attends too. Tugged by his sleeve, he is steered to his seat, led by the Lord, who greets Gawain by name as his guest. "No man in the world is more welcome," are his words. For that he is thanked, and they hug there, and then and they hug there and then and sit as a pair through the service and prayer. Then she who desired to see the stranger came from her closet with her sisterly crew. She was fairest among them. Her face, her flesh, her complexion, her quality, her bearing, her body, more glorious than Guinevere, or so Gawain thought. And in the chancel of the church they exchanged courtesies. She was hand in hand with a lady to her left, someone altered by age, an ancient dame, well respected, it seemed, by the servants at her side. Those ladies were not the least bit alike. One woman was young, one withered by years. The body of the beauty seemed to bloom with blood. The cheeks of the crone were waddled and slack. One was clothed in a kerchief clustered with pearls which shone like snow on the slopes of her upper breast and bright bare throat. The other was noosed and knotted at the neck, her chin enveloped in chalk-white veils, her forehead fully enfolded in silk with detailed designs at the edge and hems, nothing bare except the black of her brows and the eyes and nose and naked lips, which were chapped and bleared in a sorrowful sight. A grand old mother, as matriarch she might be hailed. Her trunk was square and squat, her buttocks bulged and swelled. Most men would sooner squint at her whose hand she held. Then Gawain glanced at the gracious-looking woman, and by leave of the Lord, he approached those ladies, saluting the elder with a long, low bow, holding the other for a moment in his arms, kissing her respectfully, and speaking with courtesy. They request his acquaintance, and quickly he offers to serve them unswervingly should they say the word. They take him between them, and talk as they walk, to a hearth full of heat, and hurriedly ask for especially spiced cakes, which were speedily fetched, and wine filled each goblet again and again. Frequently the Lord would leap to his feet, insisting that mirth and merriment be made. Hauling off his hood, he hoisted it on a spear, a prize, he promised, to the person providing most comfort and cheer at Christmas time. And my fellows and friends shall help in my fight to see that it hangs from no head but my own. So the laughter of that lord lights up the room, and Gawain and the gathering are gladdened by games till late. So late, his lordship said, that lamps should burn with light. Then, blissful, bound for bed, Sir Gawain waved good night. So, Gawain finally, luckily, found a place that he can relax. The king's been nothing but gracious and amazing to him, almost like in a brotherly way. And finally meets the man's queen. And we sort of see that Gawain is almost, to some extent, we can assume that he might be a little fond of the queen, noting her exquisite beauty, basically saying, wow, she's more beautiful than Arthur's queen. That's incredible. That's wow. So, let's continue. So the morning dawns when man remembers the day our Redeemer was born to die, and every house on earth is joyful for Lord Jesus. Their day was no different, being a diary of delights. Banquets and buffets were beautifully cooked and dutifully served to diners at the dice. The ancient elder sat highest at the table with the Lord, I believe in the chair to her left. The sweeter one and Gawain took seats in the center, and were first at the feast to dine. Then food was carried around as custom decrees, and served to each man as his status deserved. There was feasting, there was fun, and such feelings of joy as could not be conveyed by quick description. Yet to tell it in detail would take too much time. But I'm aware that Gawain and the beautiful woman found such comfort and closeness in each other's company, through warm exchanges of whispered words, and refined conversation free from foulness, that their pleasure surpassed all princely sports by far. Beneath the din of drums, men followed their affairs, and trumpets thrilled and thrummed as though two tended theirs. So, Sir Gawain's getting a little close. They drank and danced all day, and the next, and danced and drank the day after that. Then, St. John's Day passed with a gentler joy as the Christmas feasting came to a close. Guests were to go in the grayness of dawn, so they laughed and dined as the dusk darkened, swaying and swirling to music and song. Then, at last, in the lateness, they upped and left towards distant parts along different paths. Gawain offered his goodbyes, but was ushered by his host to his host's own chamber in the heat of its chimney, waylaid by the Lord, so the Lord might thank him profoundly and profusely for the favor he had shown in honoring his house at that hallowed season and lighting every corner of the castle with his character. For as long as I live, my life shall be better that Gawain was my guest at God's own feast. By God, said Gawain, but the gratitude goes to you. May the high King of heaven repay your honor. Your requests are now this night's commands. I am bound by your bidding. No boon is too high to say. At length of his lordship tried to get his guest to stay, but proud Gawain replied, he must now make his way. Then the Lord, being curious, made a courteous inquiry of what desperate deed in the depth of winter should coax him from Camelot so quickly and alone. Before Christmas was over in his king's court, what you ask, said the knight, you shall now know. A most pressing matter prized me from that place. I myself am summoned to seek out a sight, and I have not the faintest idea where to find it. But find it I must, by the first of the year, and not fail for all the acres in England, so help me Lord. And in speaking of my quest, I respectfully request that you tell me in truth if you have heard the tale of a green chapel, or the grounds where a green chapel stands, or the guardian of those grounds, who is colored green. For I am bound by a bond agreed by us both, to link up with him there, should I live that long. As dawn of New Year's Day draws near, if God sees fit, I shall face that freak more happily than I would the most wondrous wealth. With your blessing, therefore, I must follow my feet. In 3 short days my destiny is due, and I would rather drop dead than default from duty. Then, laughing out loud, the Lord said, relax! I'll direct you to your rendezvous when the time is right. You'll get to the Green Chapel, so give up your grieving. You can bask in your bed, bide your time, save your fond farewells to the first of the year, and still meet him by mid-morning to do as you may. So stay. A guide will get you there, at dawn on New Year's Day. The place you need is near, 2 miles at most away. So, Sir Gawain finally admitted what his mission was. He finally said, this is the reason I'm here. I have a duty. I've made a deal with a great green man who stays in a green chapel, and he says, I need to go now to try and find it. I'd rather die than break my promise, which he's most likely going to, as we can assume. So the king says, oh, don't worry about that. We know exactly where the green man is, so just relax till now. It's literally like 2 miles away. When the day comes that you're supposed to meet him, we'll send you there, no worries. Then Gawain was giddy with gladness, and declared, for this more than anything, I thank you thoroughly. Now my sight is set, and I'll stay in your service until that time, attending every task. The Lord squeezed Gawain's arm and seated him at his side, and called for the ladies to keep them company. There was pleasure aplenty in their private talk. The lips of the Lord ran wild with words, like the mouth of a madman, not knowing his own mind. Then speaking to Gawain, he suddenly shouted, you have sworn to serve me, whatever I instruct. Will you hold to that oath right here and now? You may trust my tongue, said Gawain in truth. For within these walls I am servant to your will. The Lord said warmly, you are weary and worn, hollow with hunger, harrowed by tiredness, yet you joined in my reveling right royally every night. You relax as you like, lie in your bed until mass tomorrow, then go to your meal where my wife will be waiting. She will sit at your side to accompany and comfort you in my absence from court. So lounge. At dawn, I'll rise and ride, to hunt with horse and hound. The gracious knight agreed, and bending low, he bowed. Furthermore, said the master, let's make a pact. Here's a wager. What I win in the woods will be yours, and what you gain while I'm gone, you will give to me. Young sir, let's swap and strike a bond. Let a bargain be a bargain, for worse or for better. By God, said Gawain, I agree to the terms, and I find it pleasing that you favor such fun. Let drink be served, and we'll seal the deal. The Lord cried loudly, and everyone laughed. So they reveled, so they reveled, and caroused uproariously, those lords and ladies, for as long as they liked. Then they tired, and they slowed, and they stood, and they spoke, with immaculate exchanges of manners and remarks, and with parting kisses the party dispersed, footmen going forward with flaring torches, and every lord was led at last towards bed, to dream. The house guest and his host repeat their pact again. That lord knew more than most, which tricks would entertain. So, that ends part 2. Kind of ended on a little bit of, I'd like to say, foreshadowing. A little bit of foreshadowing on the Lord's part. So, I want to end this by clarifying what the pact that was made between Sir Gawain and the Lord. So, what their pact was the Lord said, I will go and do my hunting in the woods. Whatever I win in the woods, I will give to you. And the Lord said, whatever you, Gawain, can get whatever you obtain while I'm gone, you then give that to me. And so Sir Gawain agrees. And with that, I'd like to conclude this by saying, make sure that you get your notes done. That is, if you're in my class. If you're in my class, get those notes done. I'm not playing around. Make sure you get those notes done. I don't like to give Fs, but I will if I need to. If you're not in my class, again, thank you for listening. Tell your friends. Get me paid. And thank you very much.